Yes, I've done it. And I think I've done it with the live stream on chat. So this is going to be a fun one tonight, I think, because even though it's quite a deep subject, I have got my own views on this and it's quite funny. So let's see if anybody agrees. So we're going to talk about hypnosis and hypnotherapy doing the regression. And I've got a story about that, but it's a horror story, as usual. So, first of all, I just want to say hello to everyone. I know there's no one really watching right now, but it doesn't matter because it's on replay as well. So, it doesn't matter. Hello, Kim. It's nice to meet you. I've got my caravan is a bit too warm at the moment. I've just turned the heating down because I've got it on number 3 on the Chinese heater, and it's about 26 degrees in here. So if people are feeling sorry for me for living in a van, don't. Hello, Christine and Kim. So, right, today I asked if anybody had any topics they wanted me to cover, and somebody said the hypnosis, and I thought I'll do that one then, because I believe that we are already hypnotized. So this one is going to be quite funny. So I literally do believe that we are all hypnotized and that hypnotism and indoctrination goes hand in hand. So this is very controversial. And I believe that when you go to an hypnotist on your own, they unhypnotize you. So, yep, I was that one for food for thought there. So I'll just make up some examples. The TV set, and this is controversial, some people say it does not hypnotize you, but it works on a frequency of 470 megahertz to 5 megahertz, and that is actually an hypnotic state. And if you go onto YouTube and you try and get something that relaxes you and puts you into a not so much a trance, but like a relaxation, a deep relaxation. Those are the frequencies that they use because it calms the mind. And I haven't watched television for a long, long time. But when I did used to watch it, I used to fall asleep in front of it quite a lot. But also it I used to get really emotive watching it as well. And the biggest one for me was the news and the soap operas. And in this country, it was EastEnders for me. And I remember watching that, and I started to get right stressed watching it, and a little bit depressed as well, because it was always negative, and it was always about feuds in families and dysfunctional relationships and dysfunctional people. But it was put out there that this is the norm, that these characters represent normal people in the world. And actually, it did where I come from on the council estate. They did represent people like the people I lived around. So it was very negative. And then, of course, the news, fear mongering, putting things into your head that the world's a scary place, always scary. And I do believe that the TV hypnotizes you. And you might not be aware of it, but I think during the that 4-year period, which I can't mention, all the people that went round with masks on and getting jagged and everything were all TV watchers. They get buy newspapers, they watch TV, and they hang around with other people who do those things. The people that didn't go along with it are people who generally don't go along with the TV watching and stuff. So hypnotherapy. When I've been to hypnotherapy, I've been a couple of times, and I believe that I was indoctrinated into certain things. So, for example, smoking. When I was young, I was surrounded by smokers, and we used to have a lot of smokers back in the day. And in particular, in my nana's era, when she was growing up, people would start smoking when they were in about 12 years old. And it was seen as glamorous, it was seen as cool, and everyone did it. And back in the day, like my nana, her time, they used to go to the cinema. They didn't have TV sets, so you go to the cinema and everyone would go. It was like a big event to go to the cinema, and it'd be a weekly thing. And on the big screen, you've got people like Humphrey Bogart at the time and Betty Davis, and they were always seen with cigarettes. And what that did to young people's minds was, well, these are your role models. These are the people that they look up to. And so it was seen as a glamorous thing and a grown up thing. And smoking was not demonized back in the day. And I remember when my nana said to me that during one of her pregnancies, she got stressed and the doctor suggested she took up more smoking. And that's how it was. So it's indoctrination. But I believe that indoctrination and hypnosis goes kind of hand in hand. It's not fully, but kind of. So when you go to an hypnotherapist, what they're doing is peeling back the layers of indoctrination and the hypnosis that you're already under. This is just my opinion. So, for example, if somebody's started to smoke for the reasons I've mentioned, and it's like a cool thing and it was socially accepted to smoke, then it wasn't seen as anything negative. But as time's gone on, we've been told and we've seen how dangerous it is. And so now we're like, is it really a good idea to smoke anymore? And so people will go to like hypnotherapy because they can't just quit, because it is an addiction. And it's very hard to give up any addiction because it becomes a way of life and it becomes your own basic support network. So whether it's food or cigarettes, drugs, don't matter what the addiction is. But if you're addicted to something, your brain is telling you that that addiction is what keeps you happy and keeps you sane, and it's your safety net. And you come to a point where you realize it's not working for you and it's not making you happy anymore. So when you go to an hypnotherapist, they have to peel back those layers of indoctrination that you've put onto yourself as well. So I do think hypnotherapy works, but it works in two ways. Subconsciously, because you're indoctrinated into things and then you become like spellbound by things. And the second way is to go to somebody who practices it and they undo those thought processes in you. Now, like I said, I could be wrong. And I have got a controversial mind, and the way my mind works is quite funny as well, because I don't do like mainstream thinking. So when they say things like that, this is how things are and this is how it should be and this is right and this is wrong, I believe that we live in an inverted world where we are lied to, where the smoke, I'm going to go back to the smoking thing, that was preordained. They knew smoking was dangerous back in the 20s, 30s, 40s, but they promoted it. And they promoted it to get people addicted to it. And then they knew what the long-term repercussions would be. And then what they've done is they've got things in place to get you off the cigarette. So when you look at how the pharmaceuticals work amongst all these things, it's all preordained, all of it. So I went to a hypnotherapist first, going back 20 odd years ago, and I'd been called in for, I'd had a smear test and it came back that it was faulty. What's the word they use for it now? It was pre-cancerous. And they said, we need to do this treatment with you. And I was absolutely terrified. And I thought, I don't want to go. I'm scared. And I got myself into such a state that I thought, I'm just not going to survive this. I'm not going to be able to go. And I was absolutely terrified. And then I went to see a hypnotherapist and I did 3 sessions, and you don't feel like it's working per se, but I could feel something, but I didn't know what it was. It was a lovely guy that I went to see, and he put me into this hypnosis, and I wasn't really aware I was in it, and I actually at the time thought, "Am I actually in hypnosis?" And I thought, "This is a con." So I didn't know if it had worked or not until I went for the hospital treatment. And when I turned up, I actually had no anxiety at all. And I was sat in the waiting room with loads of other women, and the treatment was going to be grueling, and I did not feel scared. So that's when I said it's worked, because I'd got myself into such a state that I would not have got through it without that hypnosis. So I know it worked. And what they've done during the hypnosis, I think, is just basically got it through into my subconscious mind that there's nothing to fear but fear itself. So you're all right, and it worked. So that was my dealings with the hypnosis. But I know other people who've had it as well. Now, can anybody be hypnotized? I actually don't think they can. I think you've got to be susceptible to it, or the hypnotherapist has got to be really good at it. Now, I don't know if you've heard of somebody. She's called Dolores Cannon. She's died now. She died when she was in her 80s. But she said that she could get people into a somnambulistic state, which is the deepest form of hypnosis you can have. So normally, when you go to a normal hypnotherapist, you go into the theta state. So you're aware of what you're saying and you're aware of what's going on around you. But when you go into the somnambulistic state of hypnosis, you are unaware of what you're saying. And so this lady called Dolores Cannon used to record all her sessions. And she started off as a normal hypnotherapist. But as time went on, she realized she could put people into a really deep state of hypnosis and take them back into past life regressions. And she could also get them to look at the world from a different point of view. And she ended up writing a lot of books. And she ended up coming to the conclusion that, having spoken to hundreds, if not thousands of people in her career, that these people were all had something in common. And she was able to take people back to past lives, and they would come out with things that weren't even documented. And she proved in her mind that reincarnation was real. And some people went back to the times where she said Jesus was alive, and she called it Jesus and the Essenes. And that was basically what you'd call the disciples. But the story of that was completely different to the one we're taught in the Bible and everything else. So it was really interesting. And she said when people would come out of that somnambulistic state, they had no memory of what they'd said. And that's why everything had to be recorded. And because it was very deep subconsciousness that she went into, people could tap into parts of the mind that you couldn't tap into under a normal hypnosis. And so I used to find her talks quite interesting. Now, going back to, this is about 15 years ago or so, I had an ex-partner who thought he was a guru, and he thought he was great at everything. And we were having a chat one day, and he said, "Have you ever thought about having regression therapy?" And I went, I think it'd be quite interesting actually to see if you can go back and what it's like and whether it be real or not, because I do believe in reincarnation, but I don't know if you can remember things even subconsciously. So I thought, do you know what, that might be a laugh. So we did it for fun, which was stupid. Now, if anyone's thinking about getting regression therapy, never ever try and do this with somebody who is not qualified, ever, because it isn't funny. And I live to regret this. So this is my horror story now of regression therapy with my ex. So we were sat in the room and it was really quiet. I made sure the phones were off and no one was coming round. And we said, right, let's just have a go with it. We didn't know if it'd work. But he said, I'm going to put you into a trance. And I was laughing. And I'm thinking, you can't put me into a trance. And I was sat on the settee and he was doing all this talk and then the countdown. And I'm like, And in my head, I was still laughing, thinking, this is a joke. This is funny. And as he was doing the countdown, I was still conscious of my own thoughts and the surrounding. So I was just laughing in my head, thinking, do I just pretend that I'm under, or do I just tell him that this is stupid? And he said, we're going to take you down to 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then he said, where are you? And I started laughing inside and I thought, I'm going to make this up. So I thought I was making it up. And I don't know if I was or not. But in my head, I was sat like, I felt like I was sat on a branch, which sounds crazy. And I was observing my surroundings. And I was looking around me and I saw all these people and they were all black. And they didn't have shoes on. And they were all wearing like clothes that they'd wear in like the Sudan, that type of thing, you know, like with the things on the head and stuff and the really colourful clothing. And when I looked around, there was like mud huts. And it was very, very basic living, if you like. And the floor was, it was like dirt floor, but it was very dry. And it was like the desert. It was very hot. But I didn't feel like I was a person. It was more like I was laughing and I thought, I'm making this up. So I thought, I'll just go with this. This is funny. And I said, I'm just, in my head, I'm making this up and I'm just a newt or something stupid like that. And I'm just observing the people around me. And he's asking me all these questions. And in my head, I'm thinking, I'm just making all this up now as we go along. But he said, I'm going to bring you away from that one. We're going to go to the next one. And the next timeline, this is where I felt like I was very small. And I don't know why, but I felt like I was a boy. And it was more of a feeling of, rather than seeing it. And I was in a crowd. And now this time it felt like it was like early Britain, almost like there's maybe 1500s or something like that. And I felt like I was in an old place like York or somewhere like that, because all the houses were really close together and rickety, and they were made out of timber, and some had like, looked like concrete and stuff, but they were all like rickety. And I was in a big crowd of people, but I was looking up at the adults. So I was obviously, in my imagination, I was a child. So I was looking up and then I looked down at myself and I was wearing like shorts. And when I looked at my hands, I'm thinking, I think I was a boy. So I was repeating this to my ex and saying, I feel like I'm a child and there's something's going on. And there's a lot of excitement around me. There's a lot of people. There's a lot of noise. And I'm looking up and there's a lot of cheering. And he's going, what are you seeing? And I said, it just feels like something's going to happen. And then I saw a horse. And a horse came round the corner and it was all cobbled streets. And it felt like it was regal, like the king. There's a king coming and he's on a carriage with horses and all these people around him. And all the crowd was cheering. But I was in this place, I was a child. So I'm thinking the excitement's more what's happening rather than who is there. It just felt like the whole place was buzzing. So he said, right, we're going to bring you out of that. Let's go to the next one. And then this was just weird. And I said, "I don't feel like I'm in a body at all." And he said, "Where are you?" And by this point, it started to feel dead real. Like I was actually really there. And it was, and then I'm thinking, is this me making this up? Or am I actually really remembering something? And I remember feeling really confused. But because nothing negative had happened, I wasn't that bothered about it. So I just thought, just keep playing along with it then. And so this time I felt like I was above the clouds. But again, it was more just hovering and just observing. And he said, "How do you feel?" And I said, I don't feel anything. I don't feel any emotion at all. I'm just chilled out. Like there's no thought, there's nothing going on, there's nothing to see. It's just there's just nothing there. It's just not an emptiness, but it feels like there's just no worries. There's just nothing there. So he said, "Right, okay then. So where'd you go next?" And then this time, I saw myself as a young girl, and this time I was walking with another young girl, and this was like Victorian times, or I don't know if Edwardian, Victorian. But this time I looked down and I was wearing a white dress, and it had frills on it and different layers. And I looked very well kept, smart, really, really nice. And the other girl with me looked like she was well kept, and the way she spoke was well spoken. And we were stood outside a walled garden, and the wall was really high. And I got the impression that on the other side of the wall is where I lived, and that this place was like an estate, and the people that lived there had a lot of money. And so I thought, I'm living the high life, you know. I'm in a rich family, so I felt really, really good about it. And he said, "Right, so you've had a nice life. Let's go to the next one." So I just skipped straight to the next one. And by this time, I was really feeling all the emotions of being there. And by this time, I was actually feeling like I was in the body of that person. So I was looking at the world through their eyes now, and I could feel their emotion. So this is where it started to get not good. So on this one, I saw myself as an older woman, like somebody who looked like she was in her 60s, and I was stood by a port waiting for a ship. And I was with my husband, and we had some suitcases with us, and I could feel that I was very well off, but I was not a nice person. And we were very, very uppity and well to do, but not pleasant people. And so the impression that I got of there is that there was something about me. I thought I was a cut above other people. And so I didn't like who I was in that one. And if that was me, really me during the hypnosis, going back into a past life, then I'd say that that was somebody I did not like very much as a person, because this woman was looking down her nose at everybody that walked by and judging everybody, and she was well to do and she thought she was better than everyone else. But I was feeling the emotions as well. So it was actually, I don't know, I just, at this point, I'm thinking, do I want to feel these emotions? But he said, "Right, we're going to go to the next life now." Now, honestly, if this is real, and I can't say it is or not, but if it is, then this life that I had the last time was not nice. And so this time I was transported into a parlour. Now, a parlour back in the day, in the times of like the war, was an old terrace house, and the parlour you would call the living room. And it used to be called the parlour, and it was used for like special occasions. And in a lot of families, it was just a place where you might go and have gatherings or maybe once a week, Sunday lunch or something like that together. But in this one, I saw the room in massive detail, and it was straight onto a street, this house, and I was like living in the parlour, and the house belonged to a family, and I was like a lodger, and I had a piano in that room, and there was like an open fire that wasn't on, and by the door that would have led to the back of the house, it had like a cast iron bed where I slept, and I could see the room in great detail with all the trinkets and all the ornaments and things like that. And he's asking me questions like, "So what's your name?" And I remember saying, "I'm called Agnes." And he said, "And where do you live?" And I said, "In Bootle." And he said, "Where's that?" And I said, "In Merseyside." Now, in real life now, I've never been there. I don't know anything about the place, and I couldn't even tell you anything about the place at all. And he said, "Where do you work?" And I said, "In a munitions factory." And he said, "What year is it?" And I said 1943 or something like that. It was during Second World War. And he said, "Are you married?" And I said, "I don't think so. There's no one here but me. I live on my own, and I'm in somebody's house." And he said, "How old are you?" And I said, "I feel like I'm in my 60s." And he said, "Right, so what kind of person are you?" And I could feel that person. If it was real or not, I don't know. But I could feel the person, and I thought, not a nice one. Really, really, really not a nice person at all. Somebody who's very negative, miserable, argumentative, drunk. And I could see all the bottles in the room. And he said, "What are you drinking?" And I said, "I drink a lot of gin and vodka." And he said, "Do you drink a lot?" And I said, "Yeah, I do. I drink all the time." And I could sort of see myself, and I was like a bit scrawny, but quite tall, but just a very, very unpleasant person. And I had no friends, and I didn't like anyone. It's starting to look like while I'm talking now, I'm like, right, okay, maybe it's the future, but no, but I felt really like I just was not a nice person. And then I could see myself going on a jaunt with like a work outing, and it was like on an old coach thing. And we were all going to the seaside, to like Southport or somewhere. And I was the only one not smiling. And I had no joy in me, and no laughter, and no happiness or anything like that. And he said, "This time, how did you die?" And I wish this is where we could have stopped it. But remember, he's not fully trained. He's not trained at all. We're just prattling about. And I thought it was a joke. But actually, I was really experiencing this, whether it was real or not. And I saw myself pick up a bottle, and I was drinking it, and I was necking like a bottle of gin. And then I started to feel really woozy and not right well. And I went over to the bed, and I fell, but I fell backwards onto the bed and laid on my back. And then I started to be sick. And that's how I died. And I actually could feel myself choking. And it was like I was sick, but I was breathing in the fumes like from the sick. And that's how I died. So I died on the bed. And it was horrible because I was experiencing somebody actually dying. And whether it was real or not, whether it was my imagination or not, it made no difference to how I felt that time, because it felt like I literally was dying. And I started to choke in real life. And he's going, "You can come out of it in a minute. You can come out of it now." And he's trying to stay calm. But I was like gasping for air. And I'm like, "I can't breathe. I can't breathe." And I started panicking. And then he made the mistake of saying, "Where did you go next?" And where I went, oh my gosh, it was absolutely horrific. So all I could feel is that my life just ebbed from me while I was on this bed. And then the next thing, I'm in this pitch black place. And it is so black that I can't see my hand in front of my face. I can't see a chink of light anywhere. There's absolutely nothing, nowhere, nobody nowhere. But I could feel and sense something around me. And it felt like a presence encroaching on me really slowly. And I could almost sense it breathing down my neck. And it was absolutely horrifying. And because it was so real, I wasn't observing it as a third party. I was actually in that feeling. And I said, I'm in hell. And he went, come out of it then, and starts doing the countdown. But I got stuck there, didn't I? And that's when I knew that this is not me making it up, because it was absolutely terrifying. And he's trying to do the talk down and it wasn't working. And I said, I can feel them coming at me. All this black, I couldn't even tell you what it was. It just felt like a presence all around me, coming in slowly, slowly, slowly. And I couldn't move because there was nowhere to go. There was no, it felt like there was nothing around me. It was just an abyss of blackness, and it was just horrific. And what ended up happening, I got up off the couch and started running around the house. But I was having a panic attack, and I'm saying, help me, I can't get out. And I was stuck in hell in my head. And it was really stupid, because it started off as entertainment, thinking this is funny. And it was not funny, because he couldn't bring me back. And he's kept calling out, I'm coming, you're coming back down, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, come back, he's saying back. And I couldn't. And I was stuck there. And what made it even more worse is I started to become part of both worlds. And I remember coming down the stairs, and I got halfway down and my eyes were open and I was trying to come back, but I was like trapped in 2 different places at the same time. And I could feel this ominous presence encroaching on me, even in my house on the stairs. It was like it was following me around, and I'd drawn it into me, and it was absolutely horrendous. And it got so close to him phoning for an ambulance, because we didn't know what to do, because he couldn't get me out of it. And I was absolutely in a right mess, and I'm panicking and going, help me, I'm stuck in hell, I can't get out of it. And he started panicking then, and he's trying everything, and it took about 2 hours to get to a point where I could come out of it. But it was a very slow process. And when I did, I says to him, don't you ever try it out like that with me ever again, because that was absolutely horrific. And I still remember it now. So this is the part where you have to ask yourself, when you go to a regression, are you literally going back in time to an old you in another body? Or is it literally your imagination? And if it's your imagination, where did that come from? What made me go to these people and these things and have these experiences? So that's something that always had me thinking about this. Is it real? Now, when I'm talking about earlier on, hypnosis and indoctrination, this all sort of ties in with each other, because we are all indoctrinated and we don't even know it. Because if you'd have said to me when I was young, what are your beliefs? I remember saying the words, I was born a Christian. And that is not true, because you are not born anything. You are not, you are born with a clean slate. And Christianity is something that you're taught. And if I'd have been brought up in the Middle East, I'd have probably said Allah. Or if I was in like China or whatever, it might have been Buddha or whatever. So we are indoctrinated because we hold on to these belief systems. But when I was doing this hypnosis thing, that actually kind of shattered my beliefs in a way, because I'm like, can you trust your own mind? There have been cases of people having hypnosis, especially regression ones, where they come back with what they call false memories. And these people accuse, say, like, they might accuse the father of abusing them when they were young, but they wasn't abused. And then people are asking, are the hypnotists putting that into your head? Now, I know in the case that I did with my ex, he wasn't putting things in my head because I was aware of what he was saying, and he was just letting me go where I was going in my head. But your imagination is a very powerful tool. It's very powerful, and that's how people can write books and stuff. But well, that's actually led me on to another topic for next time, and that's channeling, because I do channeling, right? And that's another thing. But when it comes to hypnosis, there's so much controversy around it because it can work, and some people have gone there and they've got rid of all kinds of things like habits or even illnesses and mental illness and stuff like that, because they've had it stripped away from them, all their indoctrination to themselves or from somewhere else. And so it has worked, but there are people who say it doesn't work. And if you ever look at the like stage hypnosis, I think they carefully choose a lot of those people to go up there, because I don't think that everybody can be hypnotized. And it's quite funny because when we were at school, and I'm going to use this as the example, there was always at least one child in a class, wasn't there, who could not do as they was told. They just couldn't listen. They couldn't take notice, they couldn't listen, and they couldn't behave. Even when they knew they were going to get the cane from the headmaster, they still could not behave themselves. And so they just couldn't be told what to do. So they couldn't indoctrinate those sorts of children. And what is funny is I was one of them, but I wasn't naughty. I just zoned out. I would just go into my own world and not listen. I'd just be somewhere else. But the people who I knew who were what you'd call naughty children, who couldn't be hypnotized, if you like, or indoctrinated, they're the ones who grew up with their own minds. And they're the ones who'll say, you don't tell me what to do. And they're like natural born rebels. And I don't think people like that can be hypnotized so easily because they've got a very strong minds. But you know that the human brain is like a computer, and we've got like a circuit, and they say that the brain is more powerful than any computer ever made by man, and we only use a percentage of it. So do you believe that you can go back into a past life, or is it all imagination, and is it false memories, and is that in itself indoctrination? Because it's a very deep subject when you think about it, because we get told one thing from one expert, and then another expert will come along and say, don't listen to them because it's not true. And it's the same with every subject. And they always talk over each other and undo each other and say, this is hocus pocus. And someone else will say, no, it's actually a very real thing. But I have seen cases of people who've had regression therapy and actually healed a lot of their issues, because the hypnotists will say things like, you can carry pain and trauma from a past incarnation and bring it to this life, and it can be cured through hypnosis. And they can take you back to a time where you was maybe injured, or you were killed, or something happened to you in a past life that's left a shadow, if you like, on this life, and you've carried it with you into this incarnation. And so they can go back and find that point where an event happened, and they can undo it. And so some people will swear by hypnosis and say that they've been cured of past traumas, things that have happened in this life as children or young adults, and they've been cured of it. And so if it works, it works, doesn't it? You can't say it does or it doesn't unless you've had it done yourself and you've got your own story. But as far as me with the regression thing, I do I do kind of believe it was real, but when I've gone to look at, right, this woman in my past life, right, she said she was called Agnes and she lived in Bootle and worked in a munitions factory. Agnes is a very common name. Munition factories were in so many towns and cities back in the day. How many people like that would it fit in, you know? So it was very hard and I couldn't get out my surname. So was it my imagination just making up the story, or was it real, but I just couldn't reach that part of it? But if you do hypnosis, especially regression, it should always be done in a third party way anyway. So a proper hypnotist would only take you back and let you look at it as an observer rather than you are there. Because if we've had many incarnations, we've all suffered at some point in our in the past. And if we go back to where you died and stuff like that, we've all had a traumatic death somewhere, you know, in a past life. So if you're going to get took by that back to those places, and you're going back as the person you was, and you experience it in real time, that is absolutely horrible. So I don't know. Now I've got another story, but this is funny, and I don't know what this would actually be, whether it's self hypnosis or help from the other side. But when I was in hospital having my eldest daughter, um, I was in labour and I was on my own with my mum, and it was absolutely horrible because they can't prepare you for what it's going to be like, because you can't comprehend. If somebody says to you now, or you're going to end up having some teeth out, and it's going to be really very painful, you can imagine, you can't feel the pain right here and now. You can sort of like think, well, yeah, okay, but you don't comprehend it until you're there. And when I was having my daughter, I remember it being so awful, and I was so unprepared for how bad it would be that I was actually distressed. And the midwife said to me, I want you to listen to me because I don't lie. And I've done this many times. And I want you to just trust me. And when she said that, I just relaxed a little bit. And she said, you're not going to die. You're not going to die of the pain. It doesn't feel nice, but you're not going to die. So don't get threatened. Fretted. Don't fret. So I trusted her. And during the later part of the birth, the labour, that's at the most painful part. It's the worst part. And I remember laid on the bed, and I remember the midwife saying to me, don't fret, it'll be over soon. Just try and relax. And I don't know what happened to me, but I laid back on the bed and closed my eyes. And I just felt this calm wash over me. And I was laid there and I just got monged out, and I wasn't on any painkillers or nothing. It was just literally me, the midwife, my mum. And the next thing, and I'll never forget it, I was sat by a tree near a river, a stream, and I was just looking out, and the water was running down, but not gushing. It was just like really slow moving water. And I could see on the other side the green grass and the meadows and trees and flowers, and it was absolutely amazing. And I'm laid there looking around it, and I felt like someone was with me, but I couldn't see nobody. And I felt comforted, like someone's here watching over me. And it was really lovely. And I felt, oh, this is just lovely. And I was really chilled out. And then in the distance, I heard this voice going, Kelly, Kelly, wakey, wakey. And I sort of came round. And when I came round, I was literally giving birth to my daughter. And the midwife was looking at me. She went, where have you been? And I just started laughing, and I went to a river, to this stream. I was just sat by there among it. And she went, it's almost done. And then I had my daughter within a couple of minutes. And I couldn't get over the fact that during the worst part of the pain, I must have passed out. but I passed out and went to this fantastic place. So that was funny. But that was almost like a self-hypnosis, or she did something, because I was so trusting of this midwife, and she was so good at calming me down that I just put my trust in her, and maybe I was hypnotized. I don't know, but that was really funny. But yeah, I've spoken to other people who've had hypnotherapy, and there's one guy. He said he went because he was a smoker, and within one session, he's never touched a cigarette again, and it's been 3-4 years. So it does work, but not always, and not always as you think it will. But I'd be really interested to hear what anybody else has to say about this, because it's just, it's one of those things where it's a little bit like holistic medicine, and that approach of, it's just not the same as NHS. You're looking at the body, mind, and the spirit, and some people just won't have it that anything outside of the NHS or mainstream medicine or psychology or anything like that is real or works. But I do believe in all this. I believe in alternative things like spiritual healing and Reiki and all this sort of stuff. I'm into all this stuff. But I'm just reading some of these comments now. Christine, I don't know if you're old enough, but do you remember when the TV went off at midnight? Yes, I do. And I do remember that, yeah. And I remember sometimes falling asleep in front of the TV, and that noise would wake me up. And it was like tinnitus, like that high pitch. Yes, it was horrible. But yeah, that used to wake me up, that. I remember it. And yeah, and I was same. Used to have a TV, and used to call EastEnders Suicide Half Hour, but it's true. And you know what? Funny enough, the last time I watched mainstream TV was EastEnders, and I remember the episode, and it was Peggy Mitchell stood outside the Queen Vic, and it was on fire, and I'll never forget that. And I remember feeling so hopelessly depressed, thinking this whole program is just all about misery and suffering and anger and dysfunction. And it just, yeah, I remember that episode, and yeah, that was the last time I watched TV. And then Violet's just said, Christine, your version seems similar to my feeling, though I do feel like I do feel a feeling for Jesus, be it the image or his ways the Bible man-made, and others say it's been affected by Mandela, as in scripture. There's a lot. The Mandela effect is a subject just on its own, because all of us have memories of something that's been changed now, and it plays with your head. And there's quite a few things, like TV programs, children's programs where characters were called something else, or you remember a character used to wear glasses and now they don't have glasses on. There's a lot of stuff going on we get played with all the time. But yeah, I remember when I was young, I believed in Jesus, because we had to go to church, and I remember believing in all that. And then I had all these other experiences that went on, paranormal and otherworldly, and then suddenly I got told I was demonic, and I went to church, and I went to a Christian school and everything, but I got told I was demonic by the church, because everything that I told them was happening went against the Bible. And I ended up falling away from Christianity because I felt like it was making me feel like I wasn't me anymore. Because if you see something with your own eyes and have your own experience of something, and then somebody comes along and tells you you're crazy, then you feel they're crazy, because they didn't see it and experience it, but you did. And then you've got to question them rather than you, because you know it's real if you experience it. But yeah, it is funny. But I remember, I can still now tell you the order of service in the church, and I haven't been to a church for 30 odd years. And we start off, you go in and you all say hello to each other, then you sit down, and then there's the opening service where they used to do some music, and then the vicar would do the creed, and then there'd be the blessings, and then there'd be the sermons and the communion and all this sort of stuff. And it was the same thing every week. And that's indoctrination, but it's also like an hypnosis as well, because it sinks into your head into such a way that you can just recite it without even thinking about what the words are. And I remember sitting there one day looking around the room thinking, this doesn't feel right to me. It just doesn't feel right at all. And I think our version of what we were taught about God and Jesus is not the truth. I think it's been sanitized in some ways, and in other ways, oh gosh, this is leading me to loads of subjects. But one of my favourite subjects is something you'd never cope with at all, and it's demonology. And I am actually not scared of them at all. And we were taught to be terrified of them. And I was so terrified of that word that even saying that word used to send me into anxiety. And now I don't at all. And again, indoctrination. But I do believe that indoctrination and hypnosis are on the same kind of level. Not saying that exactly the same, but they're very, very similar. And so, no, I'm yeah, my views of the world are very unorthodox in some ways, and I don't believe that everything that we're told is the truth at all. And I think that there's so many agendas going on, and I think that the whole episode over that 4 years was a big, massive hypnosis, because people were so terrified and in such a state about that, while other people walked around going, "What's your problem?" And it literally caused such a division that every single person here and everyone we know can say that that's probably the biggest psyop that's ever happened in our history, of our living history, where we can remember being divided that much. Because all the other agendas, like the LGBT and all the rest of it, all these other segments of communities that have been created, haven't caused the division that thing did. Not at all. It was like straight down the line. I lost so many friends, people who I'd known since I was a child, and on Facebook, all the people, even people I went to school with, we just got rid of each other during it all because we were so emotive. But I believe that they were hypnotized through the TV, because it was them lot that believed it more than anyone else and tried to indoctrinate us with their beliefs. But they really did believe it, which makes you think, well, that was planted in your heads, and you wore it. And the same thing happened during all the historic events like World War II. And I'll never forget these stories. And one of them was the story of the Jewish shopkeeper. And this was in the UK. And he'd run that shop for like 20 years. And he was well known in his community and well liked. And everybody had so much respect for him. But during the campaign of the war, where they kept on repeating things all the time, the leader, who was it? Not Enoch Powell. I've forgotten who it was. And they drummed it into the people's heads that the Germans were our enemies and the Jews were our enemies. And the people ended up believing it. And they would get these people, like this Jewish guy, shipped off into flipping POW camps. And these were people who they liked and who had a lot of respect for and a lot of time for. And they just ship them off like that. And you think, well, what do you have to do to a person's mind to get them to go against their own self? You know, you can get rid of your own family, your own neighbours, your own friends, your own partners, because the government or someone's told you what to think. But how did they get into your head to that degree to get you to do that? Because when you sat here now thinking, what could be said to you to make you turn on your own family and your the people that you love the most? And it's got to be a very, very deep level of indoctrination or hypnosis for you to go to that level that you can stand up and say, I'm going to go and report my own loved ones to the government and the police because I've been told that that's what I have to do. That's got to be a mass hypnosis. How can people honestly do that stuff like that? And you can't believe it. And then when you go back to the medieval times, women like me got killed for being midwives and herbalists and having opinions that men didn't like and all the rest of it. And again, how did they get all these so-called Christians who were supposed to be God-fearing and loving to turn on ordinary women the way they did? They had to have been hypnotized, indoctrinated. And I do think it is pretty much the same thing. I think it's tied in together because they work alongside each other. You've got to be really in that place to believe stuff. Now, when I was at school, I remember, I don't know if anybody's my age from the UK, I don't know if any of you ever remember going to school, and this was senior school, and being made to watch a film. And I think it was called something like The Day After Tomorrow, or it was something like that. And I think another one was called Shreds or something like that. And it was basically about what would happen if a nuclear bomb dropped on Huddersfield. Now, Huddersfield was next door to Halifax, where I come from. And so it was very real. And it was a film. And we were made to watch ours in RV. And I remember watching it and I was absolutely terrified. And it was basically what would happen if the nuclear bomb was dropped there. And it said within so many miles of the bomb being dropped, all those people would be dead straight off. But the rest of the people would get the radiation poisoning. And then it was a whole film about people struggling and suffering after the war. And it was absolutely terrifying to watch that. And they had that drummed into our heads that there was going to be a World War III, or there might be a World War III. But to somebody who's getting that pumped into their head and you start wearing that, you don't need to say there might be, you just need to say there will be, because that's how you feel it. And then I remember on a Sunday morning, we live near a reservoir, and every Sunday for a while, and it was during this time period as well, they would play this siren, like a war siren. And I remember having anxiety attacks thinking the war's starting now and we're all going to die. And then somebody said, oh no, it's just for the water, it's because of the water pump. But they were doing these sirens at the same time as us having to watch all these war things. And it was absolutely horrific. And it actually left me feeling quite disabled for a while after, because I couldn't function. Because every time I would go outside or go home, or my mind was constantly thinking, there's a bomb's coming and we're going to get killed and they're going to come and take us all and we're all going to die. And I started getting really bad anxiety. And I went to the school once to a teacher and I said, I don't know what to do. And she said, well, what's matter? And I said, those bombs are coming and that lot. And she said, I lived through World War II and I was a young girl at the time, she said. And she told me the story of how she ended up in a POW camp with her mum and how she lost all her family. And she was trying to comfort me and she made me 10 times worse because I'm thinking, well, that's what might happen with us. And it just got worse and worse. And then I remember my friend's mum coming into school and she had a word with the teacher and she said, why are you letting children watch stuff like this? And they said, oh, it's part of the agenda. We have to do it. And she said, but why? And she said, well, we have to make children aware of, and she said, but why would you do that to a child? And and she couldn't answer it. And she said, well, we're just told what to do by the government. They've told all the schools to put this film on. So all the children have to watch it. And you're right, Kim, it is all about control. And Violet, it is absolutely divide, confusion, and all the rest of it. And they have done it. Yes, they have done a great job, because look how many people are walking around in absolute fear. And we're not supposed to be living like this. We're supposed to be celebrating life and looking after each other and being in our own power. But we've all forgotten who we are because we're too busy trying to survive. And the level of stress is unbelievable. But campaigns, TV, billboards, newspapers, all these things indoctrinate us and hypnotize us into thinking that the world is a very scary place. And I don't watch TV, but somebody sent me a video the other day of Trump and this other guy having this fake fight, because I think it's all set for TV. It's all drama. It's not real. But they're talking now about World War III, and you're like, oh my gosh, here we go again. And the best way to live life now is just turn off the TV, stop buying papers, don't sit around with people who are all doom and gloom, because I used to be one of those people. And I remember when you go for this conspiracy thing, call it, I'm going to call it conspiracy now, because it sort of isn't in. But I remember going through a phase of wanting to tell everybody about this thing that was going on against us. And I wanted everyone to know that we were all being lied to, and we were all lined up for this agenda 20. It used to be agenda 21, then they changed it to 2130. So they've got a few years left. But I remember getting really on my soapbox about stuff like this and trying to get people to listen to me so they could wake up. But it was terrifying them. And when you start to wake up to what's going on, you do have like a breakdown. And Christine, you are right. The Duck and Cover campaign in primary schools, and that's going on right now as well. I don't know if anyone's heard about this, but they are literally doing it now. And this is the UK, and we don't have guns in this country. It's never been that sort of a country. And now I've got people telling me that they work in schools and they're having to teach children how to run for cover inside the classrooms, where to go and hide, how to jump into cupboards and lock the door behind them. And they're basically teaching children that there's terrorists out there that could walk into the school and just shoot them all down. And they've got to learn how to protect themselves. And I think that is absolutely disgusting. And it's like, why would we do that to little children? So if they're anything like I was, they'll all have anxiety thinking these bad men out of there are all going to try and kill us. And it's just not nice. And I just don't agree with it. Yeah, and Christine, I don't believe a word of that drama. Bush and Zelensky, that's the guy. I don't believe it. I think it's all made for TV and they're just actors. And the real leaders, if you like, are behind the scenes in the shadows. And these people are just actors. I do not believe that anything on TV. And that's why I will never vote, and I will never go along with anything that's said on the BBC News, because it's just fear-mongering and it's horrible. So I do think that if you spend enough time in front of a TV, you are hypnotized by it, and then your brain starts sinking it in, because they say that your mind can't tell the difference between reality and fantasy. So what you put in there is what you'll end up believing. And this is why this like law of attraction thing is supposed to work, because you start telling yourself positive things like, I am rich, I am wealthy, I am healthy, I am loved, and I have got all the things that I want. And if you keep drumming it into your head and your head doesn't know the difference between reality and fantasy, then it'll start to believe that we really are the creators of whatever we want to have. So you've got to look what goes in that mind. And they call the television tell lie vision. So tell lies to the eyes is basically what it is. And it is all indoctrination. It's rubbish. And I think that's why with these soap operas, they always make them negative because they're breaking down the family. You never see wholesome families on there that are together for years and years and all completely love each other and have a loving family. They're all having affairs with each other, and they're all outdoing each other, and there's always someone getting killed, and there's always a massive drama on them, and they're just ridiculous. They're not. If they do represent real life, then I'd say move from that environment and go and live in the countryside because it's just absolutely misery, isn't it? And who wants to live like that? But yeah, look, I've been talking for an hour again. I just go on. I never shut up. But yeah, I think I'll leave it for there now because I'll just end up talking all night. But I'm going to do like a week, carry on doing the weekly lives, and we'll just talk about whatever subjects are out there. But I do like controversial stuff more than any because a lot of people, like in your family, so what you find is that the so-called conspiracy theorists, and that's not what I call us. It's like the truth seekers. They're always like the black sheep in the family, and everyone thinks you're a bit nuts. And we're constantly having to deal with people around us that are like. "Oh." I'm quite lucky in my family because my family, although like some of my children think I'm a complete crackpot, other people in my family are like, yeah, our minds are open to stuff as well, and we're not that gullible, you know. But we've all fallen for something at some point, so we can't blame ourselves, and we're undoing the indoctrination and the hypnosis. So I'm going to go now, but I just want to say thank you for watching, and I will see you on the next one, and hopefully we'll come up with some good subjects for future. So good night and goodbye. Thank you. Bye, Paula, Violet, Christine, Kim, and everyone I've missed. Bye bye.